And if my identity drives my behavior, then it would be important to sort of get intentional about who I would like to become.
Hello there, it's me, Steve Mellor, and welcome in to GrowthReady, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. On this episode, we are joined by Dr. Nona Djavid, the founder of Elevate Club. And as an expert in neurology, Nona challenges our behaviors when it comes to the ways we set goals and pursue growth. As she feels the sooner we depart from our current state and consider our future state, the sooner we will be ready to tune into the version of ourselves we were capable of becoming. Hey guys, as we get started here with the episode, I want to just take 1 minute of your time to make a request for you to subscribe and rate the show. For our show to be easily discovered by other potential listeners, we need our current listeners, that's you, to take the time to not only subscribe, but to also rate the show. Whether you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, whatever platform of choice, there are typically ways to be rating the show. So go ahead and click something like that 5th star and be sure to take that additional time to leave a comment or two about why it is you enjoyed listening to the GrowthReady podcast. Your efforts on this will allow our show to be more discoverable, which means we're going to find more listeners and continue to have that significant impact on the community of human performance and personal development that I know you are all benefiting from by being listeners to this show. Please go ahead, take the time, subscribe, rate the show today. Hey, and while you're at it, why don't you share it with a few people as well? I appreciate you guys. Let's get to the interview. Hello there, and welcome in to the most recent installment of the GrowthReady podcast. I am so excited to be welcoming our guest today, mainly because having gotten to look into her and research her a little bit, firstly, there's a number of areas that I am, as I would say, equally as interested to learn from her as I know some of our audience will be once we know more about her. But at the same time, I can't help but feel as though we're going to get some perspective that we typically may not get on this show, which I'm all about. But I'm ready to welcome in Nona Djavid to the GrowthReady podcast. And Nona, the way I ask everybody before we go any further, I need to ask you, what does it mean to you to be growth ready?
I love that question, obviously, being on this podcast. For me, what it means to be growth ready is that you know where you are headed. You have an outcome. And what I call this, and I'm sure we might get into this, is having an unreasonable vision for your life, for your business, for your relationship, whatever area you're working on, is having an outcome of where you are headed and being super crystal clear about what that looks like and what it feels like and all the different elements of it. Because I think if you don't have that, you are not growth ready. If you don't have that, you don't have direction. If you don't have that, you don't have the systems or the mechanics to get there. And if you don't have that, you certainly don't know who you are going to become in the process or who you need to become in the process.
So there's a who dynamic and there's a what dynamic to this, which I really like. I really appreciate that you added that on there at the end. As much as we're looking at this from an outcome perspective, as much as we're looking at this through this, where are we going? What does that destination look like? We're also acknowledging, and I'm going to assume as we get into this more and more, that arguably the who and who we are becoming may have as much of a impact, if anything more than that, as we go forwards. Like, it really is about the who behind the what that we're actually pursuing. And so where I would love to start here, based on how you answered that question, Nona, is when you start to simply consider a destination, where might a person just simply even begin? Because we've all got goals, we've all got ideas. If we were all getting paid for our goals and our ideas and our dreams, we'd all be doing really well in this life. Yeah. So how do we take what starts maybe as a vision, an idea, a goal, and how do we actually turn it into something that we could actually classify as, let's say, a destination?
Mm. So I have three categories for the kinds of goals and visions that you could have for your life. And since we touched on identity or who you're about to become, I'd like to
Mhm,
go over those three kinds of visions and goals that you could have. So, obviously, the first one, which I think is the most common amongst goal setters or amongst people who are growth oriented already, is sort of a SMART goal. It is out there. Corporations are using it, big companies are using it. Everybody knows what it is, which obviously stands for, measurable and realistic and all of those things. By definition, this category of goals and visions, if you would, this
mhm,
category specifically, by definition, does not require you to become a different version of yourself because ultimately it's realistic, it's within your identity. You'd be taking the steps that you would normally take. Maybe it takes more discipline, maybe it takes more accountability, maybe it takes
mhm,
a coach to kind of guide you through that process, but does not really ask you to step outside of your current identity. So
mhm,
there's that one. And most people, and if you look at businesses as an example, depending on the industry, let's say a business has 10 to 30% growth rate would be considered industry standard for that
mhm.
business. All right. Well, if you set smart goals, then you'll hit those industry standards and you're doing great. Same goes for your relationship or, your life or anything else you're going for. The
Mhm,
second category of goals or visions, I call them inspired goals, inspired visions. So this is like, all right, how do I stretch outside of my current identity, but still within the same identity? So you feel like, oh, these are things that they're kind of a stretch goal, if you would. But my
mhm.
current version, if I push myself beyond this current identity, I can still get those things done. And the definition for an inspired goal is you may not know how to get there, but you have a way of figuring it out. You can call
Mm,
Steve and be like, all right, Steve, how did you do X, Y, and Z? You could watch a YouTube channel. You could read a book about it. In your mind, the goal kind of inspires something outside of yourself to reach for, but
yeah.
you're still within the current identity. The third kind of goal that you could have or a vision that you could have is what I call is an unreasonable vision for your
Mhm,
life or for your business or whatever you're working on. And this category has two criteria. One criteria is that this vision that you have, you absolutely have no idea how to get there. I mean, it is
mhm,
so crazy and it's so out there that you don't know who to ask, you don't know where to begin. Maybe it's a vision you've had for a while, maybe it's something that you get to pull out when you sit down with yourself. Anyways, one criteria is that you don't know how, you have no idea how to get there.
mhm.
And the second criteria, which is important from a nervous system perspective, is that it activates a part of your nervous system that goes, this is completely unsafe.
Mm,
You are not worthy of this. Who do you think you are to be able to do this? Or maybe Steve can do it, but I can't do it. There's got to be some level of fear or doubt that is going to be activated. And why this is important is this is the only category of a goal or a vision that is going to require you to depart from your current identity and move into the next level version of yourself. So I think
yeah.
it's important to sort of establish what it actually means to set that lofty goal that's going to have you stepping outside of your comfort zone. And then of course, then you take the steps, and I have a 4-step framework on like how do you go from this unreasonable goal where it feels completely unsafe to your nervous system
Mhm.
and then make it safe to the nervous system. And then, of course, take the actions and put in the systems, whether it's scaling your business or take your relationship to the next level and whatnot in that
Yeah.
process.
I love the ability to categorize goals in those 3 different buckets because I think immediately that allows us as an audience listening to this to say, "Okay, what kind of goals have I been setting for myself?" You know, like, because every textbook that I've read tells me that if I'm creating a goal, it's supposed to be a SMART goal. That's what it's supposed to be, right? That's what makes it a goal, and suddenly now you're saying, "Well, hang on one second. there's a couple of other ways that we can look at these goals to really put them into their own separate bucket. And in my mind, I almost want to discuss this with you now, is this notion of the SMART goal versus the inspired versus the unreasonable. Do you feel as though those buckets get progressively smaller? Is it realistic that we can have nothing but unreasonable visions? Or is it important that we maybe have some sort of portions, if you will, portion size, a larger portion size of smart, slightly smaller inspired, and maybe one or two unreasonable? Like, just in your experience, do we have the right to demand that all of our goals be unreasonable? Or is there a need for this sort of healthy balance, if you will?
I think, one of the hats that I wear as a business consultant working with or multiple seven-figure entrepreneurs, obviously we've got to set SMART goals, right? So it
Hmm.
just depends on the situation and the circumstance. So they're going to have some SMART goals that they are setting maybe on quarterly basis, and they are discussing it with their team members and whatnot. But every single entrepreneur that I work with, I have them design what this unreasonable version of their life or their business is going to
Hmm.
look like. And this will take them maybe 10x what they think their revenue is going to be at the end of the year, so that we are operating from a place of unreasonable vision
Hmm.
instead of operating in the SMART goal from that place of the SMART goals, if that makes sense. So we want to take actions based on where we are headed, not so much where we are. And SMART goals are holding us in the space of where we are, versus unreasonable goals are continuously asking us to step outside. In the process, what I've seen happen with these entrepreneurs is that they'll have the SMART goals, but because there's so much of a focus and energy given to the unreasonable vision, now they're taking different decisions. So instead of the 10% or the 30% industry standard, now they're doubling or they're quadrupling or they're hitting the ceilings. They're going past through the ceilings that they have hit over and over again
Hmm.
because there is a bigger. So it's a nuance, right? It's not just one or the other.
Yeah.
It's a combination. I think most people, probably your audience and my
Hmm.
audience, are gonna
Hmm.
fall into the inspired category or maybe the unreasonable category, and
Hmm.
maybe they have some smaller goals that are in the SMART goal category as well.
Yeah, I actually love that little visual that you're painting for us because that's how I look at this. I go, okay, if I'm slightly ambitious, like, yeah, I'm inspired. Like, I'm gonna sit. I feel like I'm gonna get in the inspired little bit. I'm gonna sit in my inspired chair and I'm gonna think, okay, like this is comfy. I feel a bit apprehensive. I know something's coming, but at least I'm not being in the unreasonable chair because then I'm just nothing but, "Oh gosh, this is a lot. I'm taking on a lot. I'm feeling nervous. I'm feeling the energy. I'm doubting myself. I'm questioning things. I'm putting myself, like you said before, in this category is, am I worthy? Is this really something I should even
Right.
be considering? But then there's this whole safety side of the SMART goal. Like you said, it's like if you want to be part of the norm and you want to experience normal growth, then you're going to do it the smart way. And this isn't about right and wrong right now. But what I love about this conversation is we're forcing people listening to say, which one am I in? Which chair am I sitting in right now? And why am I choosing to sit in that chair? Because I feel like that's really what you're getting to here is as much as we want to create the destination, we almost want to ask those more difficult questions in the moment. Is like, why are you picking that particular chair when it comes to your goals?
Yeah, absolutely. And more of these big companies are recognizing this. I read a story about Google X, which is, responsible for some of the biggest innovations of the world, right?
Hmm.
And what they discovered with their team of developers is that if they set goals that are 10x, like sort of moonshot 10x, they get better results than if they're expecting their teams to have a 10% growth in the process. Because
Sure.
when you move into the 10%, when you're looking at a 10% growth, what happened is the team members are kind of within the box. So they're trying
Hmm.
to fix the things that already exist and they're trying to fine tune and, turn up this knob and this other knob or whatever the case might be. And when they go, oh, no, 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 we're going to do 10x, they recognize that the team members were actually coming up with things that were outside of the box. So I think it is important to kind of have both in place. And then the
Hmm.
idea with the unreasonable vision or this 10x moonshot idea is that you grab that, you describe it, and maybe it's more of a long-term thing that you are headed towards, but you in the process, you actually take yourself through a process where that feels safe now. Where that
Mm.
doesn't feel like, going from I'm unworthy of this or this is too big or I'm overwhelmed or can I do this? And then internally you do the inner work to go, no, wait a second, this is safe. I'm deserving of this. And this is the expression of my full potential.
Yeah. Yes, we're removing, sorry, the like it's the unreasonable comes with unsafe, it
Yes.
comes with unworthy. So it's all the unwords, right? And suddenly now
Yeah.
it's like, well, how do we step into the unreasonable and become worthy, create safety, all of these different things. And I think the way you framed it earlier is really where I would love to go here, because it starts speaking to more of the neuroscience that obviously you're very educated and experienced in, is this departure of self. I thought the way you said that is so important, because it's like, it's the acknowledgement of the evolution right there at the beginning. It's like there's a version of us in this moment right now that for whatever reason is preventing us from seeing what is possible. So it's not about necessarily judging who we are or being aggressive towards who we are. It's just an acknowledgement that we are limiting what is possible, and there's something in us that's preventing that from happening. So I'm trying to figure out, is this a cart before the horse thing or a chicken and an egg thing? Because it's like, okay, is this about figuring us out before we figure out where we're going? Or is this about painting this picture of us where we're going to then facilitate what we need to do? Like, so I would love for you just to talk us through this, because I think that's what's really important right now for folks listening is, hey, which one is it? Which are we creating the vision going towards it? Are we looking reflectively and all this kind of stuff? So walk us through some of this for us.
Yeah. That's such a great question. You're obviously really good at what you do. So let's go back to whether it's the chicken or the egg, I guess.
Yeah.
When we are born, in the textbooks, like in the
Mm,
pediatric OB textbooks, they will tell you that you are born with only two fears. Like a baby is born with only two fears, and those are the only two fears that the baby has. One, they name, which I disagree with this, but I want to just say it. They say that a baby is afraid of falling, okay, not
mm,
failing, but
hmm.
falling,
Falling.
which basically means if you've ever had a baby or held a baby, if you go to put the baby down and if you are too harsh or, there's that sort of lack of feeling of that gravity, then the baby is going to be afraid. And the second fear that a baby has, so baby meaning everybody listening, that's how we were born, is fear of loud noises. So if there's a loud noise, then the baby startles. Now, I disagree with this to some degree. Like I get it from a physiological perspective, there's that fear response, but the baby is not really afraid of those things. The baby is just responding to them. It's more of a reflex, right?
Mm,
So it's like there is a loud noise and I respond to that as a baby. And so I'm not constantly thinking, is there going to be a loud noise? Or is my dad going to drop me or any of those
yeah.
things? That doesn't exist in the baby. So ultimately, if you take those two fears away, that science says that we have, then we are born fearless. We're born not
Mm,
only fearless, but with lots and lots of really, truly unlimited potential.
mm,
So the parts about our identity that we pick up along the way, right? Whether it's I'm shy, I'm introverted, I'm extroverted, there's obviously some genetic factor, but majority of what we pick up is in terms of our traits of our identity are picked up along the way. So maybe something happens when I'm in the playground when I'm 3 years old, and it could be direct or indirect. My
yeah.
experience directly with my caretakers and or watching them fight over money or something like that. So all of these different experiences, they create an imprinting and a programming in my system. And that gives me my identity today, who I
Mm,
am today or who I think I am today.
right.
And I like to say that this identity, in the sake of this conversation, is actually fluid. And I could wake up one day and I could be more confident. And I could wake up one day and be like, definitely not confident, 0 out of 10. So which
Yeah.
one am I? Right? We tend to be the one that we practice more. And we've been practicing it more because it's been part of our programming through life in general.
Yeah.
So getting that, out of the way is basically saying your identity is going to drive your behavior and your identity is fluid. By the way, there's tons of research around this that if
Mhm.
we have time, would love to get into it. But
Yeah.
if my identity is fluid and if my identity drives my behavior, then it would be important to sort of get intentional about who I would like to become. What
Mm,
parts of me can I express more of? What are some parts of me that I should really express less of, right? There's
right.
a part of me that procrastinates. Maybe it's a good idea to, express that part of me less or identify less with that part and
Hmm.
identify more with the part of me that's confident. And so you asked a great question. Which one is it? Do I have the vision first and then identity, or do I
Right.
become and then figure out the vision? And
Hmm.
in my opinion, it's actually the vision first. Because
Gotcha.
if you know where you are headed, then and this is part of the 4 steps that I teach, 4 step framework, the second step in the process is expanding your identity. Because if you start with identity, it's kind of vague, right? Like, I
Yep.
don't know who I would need to become. I don't know what traits I need to express more of. But if you start with an unreasonable vision, right?
Hmm.
For example, I had this vision about 4 years ago that I was going to scale my business to a point where I only work 1 week a month. Okay.
Hmm.
It was crazy at the time. It was a vision that I had. But my identity was not a match for that. My identity was like, I have to work hard and I have to strain. If I'm not working, I feel guilty. Like, I identified with a whole bunch of those types of things. It was
Right.
holding me back really from scaling my business to the place that it is right now.
Hmm.
So I committed to the vision and I created safety in the nervous system with that vision by giving it to my in my mental space, giving it to myself all the time. And then in step 2 of the process, I go, wait a second, who do I need to become so that this life and this business model is a possibility for me? Well, who I need to become is probably a lot less controlling in my
Yeah.
business, right?
Yeah.
Who I need to become is somebody who can step away and sit in ease and freedom and not feel
Hmm.
guilty. So I had to identify some of those pieces in the second step, which is identity. I think it would be challenging, not to say it's impossible. I just haven't figured out how to start with identity and then go into the vision,
Yeah.
because the version of me that wants to, even if you look at different roles, like me as a mom, what is the vision first? And then I go, oh, if this is the life I want to create for my children, or this is the kind of relationship I want to have, well, who do I need to become in the process?
Right. Right. And there's, for me, the piece that you're alluding to, I feel, is that of accountability. When we create the vision clearly enough, that accountability drives who we must become in order to
Yeah.
see that vision come to a reality. This flirts more with my world a little bit in executive coaching now, because the moment you said the word behavior, I was like, oh my gosh, you got my attention now. Not that you didn't already, but you already had it even more, because behaviorally, so much of what's at stake is the consistency of said behavior. Can we be consistent with that behavior? And
Yeah.
so much of what you're alluding to here with the unreasonable component of the vision can insist upon the shift, the change, the consistency of the behavior to make this a reality. And what I like about that is, again, it's the vision insists upon the day-to-day approach in a way that it's not necessarily always have to be about the process,
Right.
whereas it can actually be more about, hey, who am I choosing to be today, and how can that impact where it is I'm in fact going, right?
Yeah, who am I choosing to be today? Exactly. What would I like to experience? What version of
Mm,
me would I like to experience? And a good example of this, like you're talking about how, the consistency of behavior. So
mm,
that depends on the identity, right? Because if I identified, unfortunately I do not, but if I identified with like being a gym rat, like
right.
the fit person, and I have friends like that, right?
Yeah.
um, then like a friend of mine, that is who she identifies with. She will tell you that she's a gym rat. She loves going to the gym, everything that she does, and she's got 2 kids and everything else. I have never seen her write in her journal. She's my best friend, that I'm gonna go to the gym 3 times a week. She just
Hmm.
does the thing. She's consistent no matter what. Me, on the
Hmm.
other hand, that's not part of how I identify with. And so, I struggle to be consistent at that particular act. The
Yeah.
same goes for if you identify with being, say, if it's an entrepreneur or business owner, if you identify with being a CEO, well, there's a lot less you'll tolerate versus when you identify with being an owner of a business. Or if you identify with being a good mom, your behavior is going to be easily more consistent versus having
Mm.
to push and make the thing happen.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so funny. The moment you went to gym and exercise, that was how I was relating to this. Again, former athlete, former coach in sport. All I've ever known is, hey, if I'm not in shape, then I'm not myself. It's kind of just how I've
Mm.
always branded myself and how I've shown up. And it's fascinating because to everything you're saying here, my wife probably has you probably relate more to my wife. Let's put it that way. So my wife is more just like, hey, you know what? If I get there, I get there. If I don't, I don't. But she has to sign up for classes. She's that
Right.
accountability, and she's never been able to in all the years we've been together. It's been hard for her to comprehend like why is it so ingrained and so important to you to just get to the gym as often as you do, to work out as much? And for me, that's from her perspective, what I do is unreasonable.
Right, right.
But from my perspective, it's like this is all I've ever known.
It's
And what I'm doing here is I'm just reinforcing and supporting everything you're saying. It's like it's the perspective of another
yes.
that's creating this unreasonable definition, right?
Totally, exactly. So if it's part of your identity, it's so easy. Like you don't think about where do I fit this in my calendar? You just find the time and you go to the gym, right? Because it
Mm.
is your part of your identity. There's ease in that. Versus it's challenging for me or your wife to make a commitment and go to the gym. And we often drop off. I can speak from my personal experience.
She does too. She does too. She doesn't listen to this though, so it's all good. We're fine. We're fine.
So we often drop off. So a better approach to this would be if I'm really committed.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I'm not. But if I'm really committed to a six pack or being super fit, or anything like that, then a better approach instead of action first would be. I mean, you could still continue to take action parallel, but it would make it a lot easier if you did some internal work and go, okay, how can I become the version of myself that prioritizes fitness or health or any of those things?
Yeah, yeah, and again, I love when certain words we're able to just really extrapolate them through our conversation. And I was introduced to the word unreasonable through Unreasonable Hospitality, through the book Unreasonable Hospitality, and it's such a wonderful book, and it really does take some of what you're saying here, but it
Mhm.
doesn't really go into the behavioral science in any way, shape, or form. This is more about customer service and all kinds of things. But what I loved about that word when I was first introduced to it was that it was being framed through that book, for instance, through the lens of how do we make the experience unreasonable.
Mm.
But what you're doing here, and what I love about this, Nona, is that we're now getting to a point where we say, okay, is the goal itself unreasonable? Or is it just simply the version of myself and how I'm looking at the goal? Because
Mm.
that's what I'm really starting to see through this conversation now. Because we started with this, like, let's talk about direction, let's talk about goals. And you reference one of those three goals being the unreasonable goals. But
Mhm.
what I love about where we've gone to here is that anyone who's listened to this and that's following, hopefully you're starting to maybe hear now. It's like, wait, is it the goal that's unreasonable? Or is it just the perspective that I have towards the goal? And I see you nodding. And so now I want you to kind of almost bring us home in a way. Like it's just like, okay, what does that gap look like? How are we maybe walking across and bridging this gap between, okay, now I've had this awareness that maybe it's not the goal that's unreasonable. Maybe it's just the perspective and the lens that I'm looking at the goal from.
Yeah, absolutely. I have never seen or heard somebody actually have an unreasonable goal that is truly, truly unreasonable, meaning outside of this world and not possible at all.
Mm,
Typically, it's only unreasonable for the current identity. And
mm.
so when you do the work to take it from unreasonable and I'll quickly go over the little 4 steps because I think it will
Please.
clarify
Please. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
some practical steps too. But the very first step, okay, I've got something in my mind that I want to experience that feels completely outside of my current identity. unreasonable vision, right?
Mhm.
The second step in the process is called expanding your identity. So jotting down from a left brain perspective, like what are the traits I need to express more of? What are the traits I need to express less of? What are some things I see in Steve that he's expressing that I like, that I'm inspired by, that I would like to express more of? Really defining that version of yourself that is a
Mhm.
match for that unreasonable life, right? The version of
Mhm.
me who lives a 1 week a month lifestyle, travels the world schools the kids. Like, what is she like? She's kind of
Right.
playing in that area. The third step in the process is embodiment. So how can I show up as that version? And most people think, oh, you got to fake it. No, 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 no. I'm talking about how do I literally show up, answer an email as a future version of myself. And like I said, tons of studies around this.
Mm.
And then the last step in the process is actually taking unreasonable actions. Okay.
Mm.
Now, here's the thing though. Here's the thing about this whole word of unreasonable. You start with an unreasonable vision, but by the time you make that safe and you create the identity and you embody that next version of yourself, the actions hopefully that you are taking are no longer unreasonable because you've already changed so much and evolved so much in this process that now you're taking actions that are totally reasonable, except you have jumped in a whole different identity of yourself
Mhm.
that finds those things reasonable now.
Yeah.
So there's that nuance of yes, it's unreasonable, but if it is an authentic dream or a vision that you have, you can settle into it and you deserve it. And in the process, you just have to really more about unlearning the things that you have packed over the years in life and stepping into your full potential and then taking steps from that space.
Mm. Yeah, and what I like about those 4 steps is that they consider the next step before you get there, because there's one of these the first thing that came to mind when you talked about the third step I was really drawn to, and I'd love to go into a little bit of the science around the third step of embodiment, because embodiment's one of those things which I feel like can sometimes get caught in the same fire as fake it till you make it.
Right.
Kind of just like, hey, show up as a version of yourself that you're not really not, and then hopefully everything will just fall into place.
Right.
And so often we get an insight like that and we just go straight to that. We don't do these steps beforehand. Like for instance, the expansion idea. Like we don't think expansively. We don't look for what we can gain, what we can lose, what we maybe admire in other people, and how we can take gradual, incremental steps towards that before the ability to embody an identity that we've very intentionally mapped out and created for ourselves. Suddenly
Mhm.
now we have greater ownership in that, greater buy into that. We even see ourselves in that before we become that because we've done the work. And I think that's what I appreciate about what you're saying here is that if we are to embody a version of ourselves that we're becoming
Mhm.
through one's growth process, whether it's a week of growth or a year of growth, the
Mhm.
fact is that to embody a way of being requires front end work. We don't just paint
Yeah.
it and then live it. We don't just paint it and then do it through our emails the way you were alluding to. I think that right there, I think is so important. And I'd love just to maybe get one of those examples, whether it be from research, science, whatever, in terms of the power of one stepping into this version of yourself, maybe
Mhm.
before your reality, let's say, has caught up to that version of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a background in neurology, so I've always been fascinated with like how all this stuff works, right?
Hmm.
And more recently, I'm preparing for a TEDx talk, and the title of
Nice.
the TEDx talk is "Living an Unreasonable Life." So TEDx, I was working through with my coach, and she was saying you're going to need to plant some research into this. So I
Sure.
dove massively and what is the neuroscience behind all of these things? And I was astonished by how much research exists about tuning into the future version of yourself, the future identity or a different identity even.
Hmm.
And one of my favorite research that exists is around this idea of like, sort of getting in touch with the future version of yourself was they did this study with middle schoolers in low income communities, right?
Hmm.
And these are kids that have zero desire to go to college. As a matter of fact, most of them don't even graduate high school. Okay.
Hmm.
It's a very small percentage would graduate high school. So they took these kids and they split them into two groups. The first group was the control group, so school as usual, nothing changed. And then the second group, which was the study group, what they did is they didn't give them more tutoring. They didn't give them any kind of like extra special attention or anything. What they did is twice a week, they introduced them to the identity of a college student. So
Hmm.
twice a week they would have sessions, and I think it was only 20 minutes every time. So they would show them what it's like to be a college student, like pictures of a college student. This is what they do, this is what a day in a life looks like. And the results were just phenomenal. It just blew my mind because then later when they looked at these kids, they found that the study group that had this identity work of the identity was more likely to go to college, or they ended up, more of them ended up in college. They
Hmm.
had better scores in the testing that they were doing. They were more likely to turn in their homework. I mean, they had all these different parameters that had improvement between 35 and 70%
Wow.
improvement relative, which is significant, in terms of statistics, compared to the control group. So then it
Yeah.
got me thinking, well, this is crazy. If they twice a week they showed them the next level identity of what they could be, and it's giving you them 35%, 75% leverage in terms of ending up in college. Well, how can I use that? How can Steve use that? How can you listeners use this? Is okay, well, let's define that identity and let's step into her. And I think what gets muddy in here, unfortunately, with a lot of social media is this idea of like fake it and let's show that we have the things, or
Yeah.
let's do this. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about tuning into that frequency of confidence as an example, or the frequency of freedom, or anything that you are looking to experience more of, and doing that while you drink your coffee. Like, how can you express more confidence while you drink your coffee? And it's more of a practice than it is to fake it, because I tell my students often that what you are doing is actually faking it because you're
Hmm.
expressing your limitations and your blockages. So, you practicing your full potential is actually the most real thing that you could be doing. You just don't have enough practice in it because you're addicted to the old patterns.
Right. Right. And the term of tuning in, I think tuning in is so, it's such a, again, I'm a big visual guy, and it's just like this idea. I could just picture myself when I was a kid trying to tune in the radio in the car, and it's like you're going back, you're going forth, you're going back, you kind of get it, and then you go back, and you're never quite there until you're there, and then you find it, and then rinse and repeat the next time you want to change the station. And so for me, that idea that when it comes to our identity, our future state, that it does start with this back and this forth. Some days we're confident about it. Some days we're sure about it. The next day we doubt it. The next day we question it. And then one day we find complete alignment with it. We just get comfortable in it. It becomes the norm. And I think
Mhm.
that in itself is such a powerful visual. And again, it sounds very similar to this identity based motivation theory, that it could be that very same research that you're referencing. But that for me is, it is so powerful. It is so useful, but it does start with this anchor, if you will, of just like, what is the identity? What is this version of me that I'm moving toward? And I would be remiss not to ask you, but when you think about these students you work with, clients that you work with, and this is helpful, I would believe, for any listeners thinking, okay, this sounds tricky. This sounds like it's going to be hard for me to sort of navigate. Where do you typically find people slip up or maybe give up on this kind of work as they find some of the adversity, some of the challenges that come with it?
You know, Sadly, I have to say, I think most people give up on step one, which is creating
Mm,
that unreasonable vision. They'll either
yeah.
say, I don't know what I want, or they're unclear, or they pick a borrowed dream because Steve drives a Ferrari, then I want a Ferrari. Like, there's
Mm,
some kind of mishap that happens at the very beginning of the process. Now, if you can get past that, then the hardest part is actually making a commitment to that vision and saying yes to it, no matter what your mood is like, no matter if your business is not working, your career is not going where it needs to go. Like, continuing to say yes and creating more certainty in the unreasonable vision than the
mm.
doubts and the fears of the current circumstances. I think that's also the second part, if you can get through the first part.
Yeah. Can you get to certainty? Like that is, I think people would pay good money for certainty, right? And it's just like that. That's the world that you and I obviously operate in. It's like how can we get people to a level of certainty where they don't want to quit, where they want to keep going through with the work. But I think that is such a powerful insight and reminder for anyone listening, is this idea that, you know, just sitting down and daring to make the vision, like that right there is the beginning. And can you be bold enough to make it as unreasonable as possible where you feel incentivized maybe to do that work around yourself? That's really what I'm hearing in terms of the challenge maybe for our listeners right now.
Yeah, and I like my vision to pull me instead of
Mm.
me trying to push to make something happen. I'd like to wake up, and when I do commit to my vision of like reading through the vision and feeling through the vision, when I do that, it does pull me in stepping into those unreasonable actions. Versus if I'm not connected to that vision, then it's operation as usual. And so I make 10% improvement in my business or 10% improvement in my relationship. There's no quantum leap, or there's no big outside the box magic that happens here.
Yeah, yeah, and so in that assumption, I wanted to just ask you, like, when you think about how you approach this work for you specifically, what is maybe a daily ritual? What is a daily assignment that you give yourself to ensure that, hey, I'm not sleeping on this work. I'm always remaining committed to it.
Yeah, I used to have a whole routine in the morning, wake up at 4 o'clock, do the cold plunge, although never stuck with that either.
Yeah.
I used to have a whole routine that I would do, and now I have one non-negotiable that creates a domino effect for everything else. And my non-negotiable is, and I've done the work to create the unreasonable life, but where it is for me and my family next, and describing it, and I've written it as if it is already here in the present moment.
Mhm.
So my non-negotiable is at least once a day, I will read through that vision so that I'm reminded of where I am headed. So when I sit down with you and do a podcast, or when I answer the emails, or when I'm with my children, or when I travel with my husband, that is the first thing. Sometimes it's the last thing, but at least once a day, I'm staying connected. So my actions, my behavior, my thoughts, how I express different things are coming from that place, and not the current limitations that I might be feeling in general in my current identity, and or that day because I woke up
Mm.
cranky or whatever the case might be. So it keeps me really, really grounded.
I'm always going to say, I probably say this at some point every single episode, like, I'm an advocate for simplicity, and you just gave us a really heavy dose of simplicity. Just like, hey, listen, this is how you can get started with this. Like, if you do dare enough to create that truly unreasonable vision, are you just simply able to not only write it down, but dare to look at it every day and remind yourself and keep it at the front of your mind? Because that right there, folks, is that can be an ingredient for your growth journey. That can be what tells you you are in fact ready to take on the growth that you so adamantly believe you're capable of, even if you're not there yet. And so I really do love that simple, just daily reminder that can be a true domino effect to any and every action. And more importantly, from what I'm hearing through this conversation, just the way in which you show up, the way in which you represent yourself for you in service of that goal every day. If anyone's listened to this and they're just thinking, my gosh, how do I get more of Nona? How do I get access to Nona? Like, where do we start with that? Where can you tell people to find as much information as we can possibly learn about you?
Yeah, I would love a personal connect. So if you listen to this podcast and this resonated with you, any parts of this resonated with you, just send me a message on Instagram. If you like what I teach in there, you can follow me. But also, more importantly, for your listeners, again, if this resonated, if you send me a message, I have a 90-minute training where I walk through the 4 steps of the quantum leap, what we kind of briefly talked
Mm,
about in here.
yep.
I break every single one of them down, and it's a workshop style. So I walk you through the entire process, and you'll sit down and hopefully with a journal and a notebook and walk yourself through the process to quantum leap your life, your business, your relationship, whatever you're working on. You just have to have 90 minutes to sit down to do it.
Oh man, we've all got 90 minutes. And we don't want to give away everything on this. No, we want to give them a little bit of like a reason to reach out and follow up with you. And so if we got into the whole quantum leap on this, it would have been like, well, I got no use for her now, you know. This is gonna at least hopefully give people that incentive to go check that out. We'll have all that information in the show notes as we always do for our guests. But in the meantime, Nona, this has been an absolute pleasure. I've loved having you on. Just best of luck with everything, and thanks again just for the generosity of all these insights today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And my thanks again to Nona for joining us on today's episode. I like getting into the science sometimes. I don't get into the science too often on this show. I'm not a science guy. I'm very honest and open about that. But at the same time, sometimes the science really does reinforce a lot of what we all know to be true. And one of those things is the way in which we show up, folks. It's on us. And the question is going to be, are you brave and bold enough to create a version, let's say, of a life that is further along or more ideal or greater that you can really work into? Because my assumption is if you're listening to this episode, there's something in your world that you are committed to making better, to growth. It doesn't have to be all aspects of your life. But hey, if you're listening to this show and you're completely satisfied in every capacity of life, good for you too. All we've discussed here with Nona today, though, is the importance for us to take that time to get clear on the direction that we're going and to ask some of those difficult questions. Is it going to be supplemented by the version of myself that I am currently? Or does that version of myself currently need a little bit of work? Do I need to check in? Do I need to ask some harder questions? And do I need to develop some behaviors that I know will better align with this direction that I've created for myself? So a little bit more check-in, therefore a little bit more accountability, and a little bit more intention. And hopefully in time, that's going to give you more consistent direction as well as you move through whatever your growth journey looks like at this time. So again, my thanks to Nona for joining us, for speaking some science with us today and having an opportunity just to dive into the value of behaviors and really reinforcing the power that these behaviors can have on our growth journey towards whichever direction and whatever destination we are committed to getting to. Again, my thanks to you, as always, for joining us on the show. Hey, if this is your first time, I really do appreciate you joining us, but don't let it be your last. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you share the episode with somebody in your respective community. And hey, if you loved it as much as I certainly loved it, take the time to rate the show as well. Every 5-star rating goes a long way to helping us continue to build the brand and build the awareness of the show. All the best in anything and everything you've got going on in your world right now. I look forward to doing this with you again very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.